In 1965, a sandwich almost ended the space program. Not because of an explosion, not because of a system failure, because of the crumbs. Two astronauts smuggled a corned beef sandwich aboard a NASA spacecraft. The bread began to break apart in zero gravity. Crumbs floated free in a pressurized capsule filled with pure oxygen. Congress called a hearing. NASA nearly cancelled the mission. That story will make you laugh until you realize it almost killed them. This is the episode no press conference covers after a rocket launch. 4 days ago, 4 human beings splashed down in the Pacific Ocean after traveling 694,000 miles around the moon. They broke a 53-year record. They carried 189 items on the menu, including 5 varieties of hot sauce. 5 varieties of hot sauce on a mission to the moon. That's not a luxury. That's a medical necessity, and the science behind it will change how you understand the human body. From Gagarin's toothpaste tube in 1961 to Artemis II last Friday, this is the story of the most dangerous, most underestimated, most profoundly human problem in the history of space exploration. What do you eat when gravity disappears and your body starts to betray you? Before the first human ever left the atmosphere, scientists faced a question that had never existed in the history of biology. Could a person swallow in zero gravity? No one knew. The act of swallowing uses muscular contractions. It doesn't require gravity. But in 1961, that fact hadn't been proven. Doctors genuinely feared that food might travel backward, that liquids could pool in unexpected places, that the simple act of eating might be physiologically impossible beyond Earth. These fears were the reason NASA engineers spent years designing food that required almost no swallowing at all. Liquids squeezed from tubes directly into the mouth, bypassing every variable they couldn't control. Picture this: a glass of orange juice in zero gravity. You don't pour it. You can't. The moment it leaves the container, it forms a perfect, trembling sphere that drifts silently through the cabin. Beautiful. Terrifying. Completely undrinkable. Unless you chase it with your mouth. Now imagine doing that while hurtling toward the moon at 25,000 miles per hour. The first meal ever eaten in space was by Yuri Gagarin in 1961. Pureed meat in a toothpaste-style tube, followed by chocolate sauce from a second tube. John Glenn, 2 years later, proved that humans could eat and swallow in weightlessness, with no ill effects. The swallowing problem was solved, but the astronauts hated the food, and NASA's solution to the next problem was something no one would admit in a press conference: feed them as little as possible so they wouldn't need the bathroom. This was the state of human space nutrition in 1962. Pure survival. The moon was 8 years away, and no one had figured out how to make a sandwich. Then, in March 1965, 2 astronauts nearly ended the space program with a corned beef sandwich. Pilot John Young purchased one from a delicatessen and smuggled it aboard Gemini 3. Mission Commander Gus Grissom loved corned beef sandwiches, but Young was supposed to eat only approved food, and Grissom wasn't supposed to eat anything at all. Floating crumbs from the bread posed a real threat in the pressurized cabin. Congress called a hearing, a congressional hearing, over a sandwich. The mockery misses the point. In a pressurized capsule with exposed electronics, a pure oxygen atmosphere, and zero tolerance for malfunction, a single breadcrumb could short-circuit a system, could ignite, could kill. Food in space was never just food. It was engineering. It was national security. It was the difference between reaching the moon and dying 200 miles above the Atlantic. The clock was running. The Soviets were ahead, and the most sophisticated civilization in human history couldn't figure out how to feed 4 men for 2 weeks without a congressional incident. Apollo changed everything. Not because of the moon landing, though that helped, but because of a woman named Rita Rapp, and because of a biological phenomenon that no one had predicted. Rapp worked closely with astronauts to create recipes that appealed to their preferences and developed a special spoon bowl. So astronauts' experience of eating in microgravity was more reminiscent of eating on Earth. The first food ever eaten on the surface of the moon was a bacon cube. Buzz Aldrin's favorite space food was shrimp cocktail. These details matter, but they obscure a deeper story. Something strange was happening to the astronauts' bodies. When a human enters microgravity, gravity no longer pulls the body's fluids downward toward the legs. Those fluids redistribute equally throughout the body. Within the first few days, astronauts develop puffy, rounded faces as fluid accumulates in the upper body and blocks the nasal passages. NASA engineers nicknamed it the Charlie Brown phase. This nasal swelling obstructs the transport of odor molecules to their receptors, which can translate to a 70% reduction in flavor perception. 70%. Food that tasted rich and complex on Earth becomes flat, muted, almost tasteless in orbit. This is why every space mission since Apollo has carried hot sauce. A 2025 peer-reviewed study confirmed that pungency from capsaicin provides direct chemical stimulation to the trigeminal nerves, which are not affected by fluid shifts. Spicy food is one of the only categories of flavor that penetrates the sensory fog of microgravity. NASA's Human Research Program chief scientist Stephen Platz confirmed this directly after the Artemis II launch. If you don't taste your food, you don't want to eat it. And if you don't eat it, you lose weight and you lose strength. The Artemis II crew carried 5 varieties of hot sauce, not as a comfort, as a prescription.
Wait, so in space, food has no taste, crumbs can kill you, and your body forgets how to digest normally. And they still sent people up there for 6 months? Respect.
In 1973, NASA built the first kitchen beyond Earth's atmosphere. Skylab astronauts were staying for weeks, sometimes months. Survival food was no longer enough. For the first time, they could sit down at a table. Skylab had onboard refrigeration and 72 different menu items. A refrigerator, a table, In the context of what had come before, paste in a tube, crumbs that could kill you, these words represent an extraordinary leap. But Skylab also revealed something the nutritionists had not anticipated, and it was terrifying. In the absence of gravity, the human body begins to consume itself. Without the constant mechanical resistance of gravity pressing on bones and muscles, the skeleton loses calcium at up to 1 to 2% of bone density per month. Muscles atrophy. The heart shrinks. Astronauts returning from Skylab's longest mission, 84 days, had lost significant muscle mass, bone density, and cardiovascular capacity. Food was no longer about taste or comfort. It had become the front line of a war. The human body was fighting against the void. Nutrition, its composition, its timing, its calcium content, its protein density would become one of the primary weapons in that fight. In November 1985, a Mexican payload specialist named Rodolfo Neri Vela made one of the most important contributions to the history of space nutrition. He brought tortillas. Once on orbit, his crew members noticed that tortillas, unlike regular bread, didn't create crumbs and could be used to make sandwiches or hold other food items. Since that mission, tortillas have been standard fare aboard the ISS. The bread problem that nearly ended Gemini 3, resolved by corn flatbread and a Mexican engineer. But the tortilla story is about more than engineering. It's about what happens to human beings when they eat together. Psychological research on isolated spacecraft crews has shown that food variety, quality, and quantity directly affect performance and overall well-being. On the ISS, the communal meal became medical protocol. Meals aren't just refueling moments, but the primary opportunity for crew members to socialize and share different cultures. The most culturally diverse dining table in human history sits 250 miles above the Earth, moves at 17,500 miles per hour, and is held together, in part, by tortillas. But beneath the diplomatic menus and the tortilla triumphs, a deeper problem was accumulating. Joya Massa, principal investigator for NASA's Veggie Plant Research Program, identified the core issue. Over time, that packaged diet loses quality and it loses nutrition. Some of the vitamins will degrade. Astronauts tend to lose weight. We think this weight loss is due to menu fatigue. For a 6-month ISS mission, this is manageable. For a 3-year Mars mission, with no resupply ship, and communications delayed by up to 30 minutes each way, it becomes a potential mission-ending crisis. Astronaut Douglas Wheelock framed the existential risk directly. When food tastes like plastic, it affects your performance and mood. For 6 months, you could do it. For 3 years, that might be too much of an emotional detachment from our normal, organic world. NASA's food scientists are not solving a catering problem. They are solving the last great barrier to Mars. On August 10th, 2015, aboard the International Space Station, 3 astronauts gathered around a tray of red romaine lettuce. They added olive oil and balsamic vinegar. They ate, Expedition 44 members became the first American astronauts to eat plants grown in space, a crop of red romaine harvested after weeks of cultivation in microgravity. It sounds modest. It was historic. NASA has since grown lettuces, tomatoes, radishes, and Chinese cabbage. In 2021, astronauts grew and ate chili peppers, the most complex food crop yet cultivated in space, requiring 137 days to reach harvest. In 2025, the Crew 11 mission launched with a new seed library, including wasabi mustard greens, red Russian kale, and dragoon lettuce. Every one of these experiments is preparation for Mars. A crewed mission would take 3 years round trip. A 4-person crew would need an estimated 10,000 to 11,000 kilograms of food. The current cost of sending food to orbit runs between $20,000 and $40,000 per kilogram. The math is impossible. Mars cannot be fed from Earth. The garden that began with a tray of lettuce in 2015 is the seed of an entire civilization. Last week, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen flew 694,000 miles around the moon and back, farther than any human beings in half a century. They broke the distance record set by the Apollo 13 crew in 1970. And they did it with 189 unique items on the menu, 5 varieties of hot sauce, packed specifically to compensate for the fluid shift that suppresses taste in microgravity, 10 different beverages, including coffee and smoothies. Compare that to Yuri Gagarin in 1961, 2 tubes of meat paste and chocolate sauce, eaten in 108 minutes before returning to Earth. 65 years. 187 additional menu items. The distance between those two numbers is the entire history of human space exploration compressed into a dinner tray. The next frontier of space food is not a better freeze-dried steak. It is microbes. The European Space Agency is testing how microbes can convert gases into protein-rich powders in microgravity, an experiment called Obi-Wan that could allow astronauts to synthesize nutrition from the carbon dioxide they exhale. A future Mars crew could breathe out and eat what they breathe. Waste becomes nutrition. The human body, closed off from Earth, becomes its own supply chain. For 3 million years, humans have fed themselves by hunting, farming, trading, and transporting. Every civilization in history has depended on a supply chain that connected Ether to Earth. The Artemis and Mars programs are, for the first time in human history, designing a system where that connection is permanently severed by distance, and the human being must manufacture sustenance from the void itself. NASA's Deep Space Food Challenge has invited engineers, chefs, and scientists to design food production systems that operate entirely without Earth resupply, compact bioreactors, hydroponic chambers smaller than a refrigerator, 3D-printed food assembled from nutrient concentrates. NASA's planned Artemis II mission includes a lunar surface experiment called LEAF, Lunar Effects on Agricultural Flora. which will test whether Earth crops can grow in the actual lunar environment for the first time in history. We are not feeding astronauts anymore. We are building the agricultural infrastructure of a species that has decided to leave its planet. There is a detail from the history of space food that almost no one knows. The technology NASA developed to keep food edible for months without refrigeration, the HACCP system. Hazard analysis and critical control points was not kept in a government archive. It was released, shared, adopted globally. Today, JCCP is the food safety standard used in every commercial kitchen, every food processing plant, every hospital cafeteria on Earth. Every time a food manufacturer identifies a contamination risk in their production line, they are using a methodology invented to keep astronauts alive in orbit. The lettuce grown under LED, lights on the ISS, inspired a generation of vertical farms, now producing food in urban warehouses across Asia and Europe. The precise nutritional engineering developed for Apollo is the foundation of modern sports nutrition science. The food packaging innovations from Gemini became the basis for commercial retort pouches used in supermarkets worldwide. Space did not just change how we eat in space, it changed how all of us eat on Earth. Every civilization in this series, Rome, Han China, ancient Egypt, the armies of the Second World War, solved the problem of feeding humans in extreme conditions, and every solution left a mark on the world that outlasted the civilization itself. Space is no different, except this time, we can watch it happening in real time. Here's the thing that the engineers don't talk about after a splashdown. When Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen were pulled from the Pacific Ocean last Friday after 694,000 miles. After the lunar flyby, after 10 days of systems tests and scientific history, the first thing most of them wanted was not a press conference. It was a meal, a real one, something warm, something that tasted like home. That hunger is not a detail. It is the entire story. NASA's own researchers have concluded that the greatest threat to a crewed Mars mission is not radiation, not the 200-day journey, not the unknown geology of a planet no human has touched. It is the food, because if astronauts stop tasting what they eat, they stop eating. And if they stop eating, they lose weight, they lose strength, and they lose the will to complete the mission. The human body is the most sophisticated machine ever to leave this planet. It survived the void between Earth and the Moon. It will survive, eventually, the 140 million mile crossing to Mars. But it will only make that crossing if someone, somewhere in a laboratory in Houston, or Tokyo, or Warsaw, figures out how to make the food taste like something worth living for. Every civilization in this series solved the same problem in different forms. How do you sustain human beings in conditions that were never meant for them? Every answer changed the world that came after. Space is no different, except this time, the world that comes after is not a new empire or a new dynasty. It's a new planet. We are not trying to reach Mars. We are trying to survive it.
If this episode changed how you think about what's on your plate, hit like, subscribe to the channel, because next episode we go back 1,000 years to a civilization that built the largest empire in the Americas without a single iron tool, and their food will leave you speechless.